Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Dave World Toys Toy Chat. Well, this is a Tuesday night because I've got a special guest in the background. He's a vintage toy collector. He goes up and down the country for amazing shows and that sort of stuff. All I'm going to say is, I'll welcome to the channel and hopefully you'll say hello. Vintage VTR, Dave. Hey, Dave.
Hello, Dave. I could have just been quiet there. Of course, I'm going to say hello.
Quite a few people do that, so don't worry about that. So, just for all the brand new people watching and future watching, what do you click, Dave?
Oh, straight in there. Straight in there with the first question.
Well, you always start with the first question. If not, people always say hello and that sort of stuff. If not, you get straight in there and says, what do you collect? That sort of stuff. So people don't ask him that, the first question always in the chat is hello or what do you collect?
You don't hang about, do you? Actually,
No.
before I answer that, so I'm a Dave and you're a Dave.
Dave.
Do you like being called David or Dave?
I ain't too fussed.
No.
99% people call me Dave, but if you've done something wrong, it's David.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was always if you're in trouble with your parents.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, your mates is Dave, isn't it? Yeah. Right.
Weirdly enough, even at school, I had a best friend called Dave. We were both called Dave as well. So I was like, when one shaded one, it was like, that's him. I was like, just walked away.
Yeah, one day we should just have a stream of just full of Daves.
Daves.
All the Daves collecting. Wow. Straight in there with the question, what do I collect? Well, probably the simple answer is too much. I have an eclectic collection of stuff all around me and hidden away in drawers and stuff because I've run out of space. But I guess if I was to narrow it down, anything from the 70s and 80s, especially I guess anything that's kind of attached to films or cartoons of the day, especially the classic 80s stuff. So anything like A-Team, Karate Kid, Rambo, partner collects Police Academy. I'm just looking around there, all those sorts of things, and then all your classic 80s stuff like Star Wars and a little bit of motor and stuff like that. Indiana Jones and what have you, and then going back into the 70s because for me I love the 70s stuff. I think there's just an appeal to the toys back then. I'm not sure why, but I feel like in the 70s they had a bit more free reign and they could just go and explore and try out different stuff. But all those classics like Evel Knievel and $6 Million Man and all those kinds of things. So love all that as well. So my tastes are all over, but I collect in a kind of strange way, I guess. I collect like most collectors. I collect what I like, and some lines I'll try and complete, and other lines I won't try and complete. I'm just happy to have the odd one or two examples from that line. And most of the stuff I have is loose, I guess. I've got some carded bits and some boxed pieces.
Yeah.
But most of the stuff is loose. And what I do like to do is if I collect a loose figure, I do like to try and have it complete. So if it's that's just my way of doing things. For me, it just looks great on the shelf when it's complete with all the accessories and what have you.
Yeah.
So and there's some fun in trying to complete figures as well. So yeah, all sorts of stuff there. All sorts of stuff.
Crazy.
I tend to draw the line at the end of 89. So as soon as you get into the 90s, although there's some toy lines there that are pretty iconic, I guess, and have all the hallmarks of 90s toys and very bright colors and all that kind of stuff, all those turtles and Toxic Crusaders and all those other things. I draw the line at the 90s.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future, I might, if I have more space, I might look at 90s, but
Basically comes down to space, doesn't it? So
yeah, always comes down to, well, money, space, and time.
yeah.
Those are the
Yeah,
factors.
just to let you know, Ronaldo is in the chat, and also our Thursday night partner, Dark Liking's in the chat as well.
Hey, Dark Liking.
So there you
go.
So technically, when you go up and down any toy fairs then looking for toys, do you feel disappointed if you don't come away with anything from a toy show? Because if you're collecting a certain two eras, 70s and 80s, do you find sometimes a bit disappointed, or does it make a difference?
Well, I've been going to toy fairs probably for about 10 years. I mean, I'm, compared to some people, I'm a fairly recent or new collector, really, because some people have been collecting the whole life, and I haven't. I started primarily through my son, so he got massively into cars when he was young, and he got into motorsport as well when he was very young, like 4 years old, I guess, 5 years old, and he wanted racing cars, the old kind of like small kind of racing cars, but he didn't just want a racing car. He wanted cars that actually came from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. He just loved all that motorsport stuff. So I thought, where am I going to get all those? So I decided to just go to local, toy and train fairs, the typical ones you get in the UK, those sort of smaller ones, where you go in and there's just like stalls of corgi and dinky cars and trains. I wasn't interested in the trains, nor was my son, but we would pick up cars. But then as I was going around those shows, I go, oh, I remember that Star Wars figure. I had that, and I remember this, and I remember that, and I was like, oh, there's that Action Man over there. And so I just bought a few things, and then I was brand new to all this, so I realized very quickly that some of these things were in various conditions. So so I'd just take some home and I start fixing some of them, and then I go back and with my son and buy a few more, and it's all just snowballed from there, basically. So I've been to quite a number of fairs, I guess, and in the early days I would always come home with something. Because my collection was smaller. So, and also back 10 years ago or 8 years ago, you could go around the fairs and you'd see so much 80s stuff. I'd be able to pick up Rambo figures, Karate Kid figures, all those things, some of them complete. I'd be able to, every show I could almost guarantee I'd see those kinds of figures, those classic 80s figures. So I'd come home with a bag full of stuff. I'd have like 3 Rambo figures, this, that, a boxed Star Wars vehicle or whatever it might be. I'd come home with loads of stuff. But now, especially since the lockdown, I don't know why, but more often these days I come home with a lot less stuff. And I think that's probably down to the fact that there's just not as much 80s stuff at the fairs anymore. I really do believe now that a lot of that stuff has been basically soaked up by all the by everybody. There's been especially with the lockdown, there's such a huge like load of new collectors that have come in, and I just think all that 80s stuff has just been soaked up, and it's now sitting in people's rooms like this one and your one. So I mean, you do find 80s stuff, of course, but what you do find now is of varying quality, may not be complete, so it's definitely harder to find. And the other thing is, I think I've just become a bit more picky now as well. I just I don't, there's the things that I'm looking for now, you don't, I guess it's not stuff that you see every day at a toy fair. So I do a lot of hunting online, Facebook groups now. I do a lot of sort of scouring of the US, see what's over there and get it brought over to the UK. So like this Sandown toy fair that I've just been to, I came home with some nice bits, but only a few small bits. Sandown before that, I came home with nothing. But it's the
thrill of the hunt, isn't it?
Yeah, That's the hunt, right? You can't guarantee that you're going to find anything every time you go out.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the game, isn't it? So yeah, I don't mind. I'm quite happy now to walk around and talk to everybody. That's the other difference. It's a huge difference from 8 years ago, especially before I started my channel. I didn't know anyone, so I knew a few of the dealers, but you know, now when I go around, I'm talking to everybody. I'll talk to a lot of the dealers. I know a lot of the dealers now there, and I know a lot of the other collectors as well through YouTube. So I spend a lot of time just talking to people now.
Crazy, isn't it? So technically, one quick question about, I know you do NEC, you do Sandown. Is there any much difference between the two shows, or because one's down London, one's Midlands area? I know. I just wanted to like your perspective of the show and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I like I say, the NEC middle of the country in the UK, and you're getting dealers coming from the north and the south. It's a really good meeting point, I guess, for lots of different dealers there. A lot of the ones I go to, obviously, I live in the south of England, so a lot of the ones I go to are around my area. So that would be Sandown, Kempton, and then there's a whole host of smaller fairs as well.
Yeah.
What I would say is that I don't know if there's much difference across the country. Obviously, you get different dealers, so you're seeing different things.
Yeah.
What I would say is there's a big difference between small and large toy fairs. So the larger toy fairs, you're going to get a lot more of the stuff that I'm looking at, vintage stuff. You know, most toy fairs nowadays, it's a mix of modern and vintage.
Yeah.
They sell everything now, don't they, at these fairs. So I would say the big difference is between those smaller fairs and the larger fairs, where, you know, those small fairs, you are going to find a lot more of the traditional car and train kind of dealers. And then those large fairs, you're going to get all sorts of people. You know, it's those large. I've never actually sold at a fair. You haven't, you, Dave? So
yeah,
you know how much it costs to have a table, and I don't think it's cheap, is it?
It all depends where you go. I think the most expensive, like Barry Potter shows, of like 65, which is the NEC. I think London is about the same. Other Barry Potter, like Stafford's 37, 35 a table. There's shows up and down the country which are 45 a table. I am helping a friend down London, literally this weekend at MCM Comic Con, and they are 500, £600 a table, trying to put your VAT on everything else on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
and then basically you went to the Star Wars Celebration. It was £2,000 for a 3 foot square foot table, which is a 6 foot table in our terms, or a table and a half.
That's mad.
For £2,000 for 4 days, you know.
Yeah, so if you're a dealer and you want to sell stuff, you obviously want to cover the cost of the table. So
it's basically you cover the cost of the table, your petrol money from where you are. If you got a hotel, you got a bit of food, and then hopefully you don't find anything to buy. If not, you could spend anything, but then it's the stock you bought it with as well. So it's, perfect. And some of us, like for me, I'd take wherever I take my table money. After that, nothing else matters to me.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, if you're selling, then you want to cover all those costs, like you said. So you want to make sure that there's enough people, right, to go around and actually buy your stuff. So you're going to get a lot more dealers going to those larger fairs because there's a lot more, obviously, a lot more people going in and buying. Those smaller fairs, like I've been to some really small fairs around here. There's one in, I don't think it's there anymore, actually. I think they may have moved. There's one in Windsor, which was tiny. But the good thing about those fairs is that sometimes you find a real bargain.
Yeah.
Because there may be a guy there who's mostly focused on dinky cars or trains, but they just got that nugget of a vintage 80s item on their table. They don't quite know what it is that they've got, and you can get a real bargain. I remember at Kempton once I found this was before all the guys have started stalling there recently. There was a guy there, just had like dinky cars and stuff, and then he had this small box on the side of the table. And looking in there, he had a load of Micronaut stuff.
Oh.
He had all these time traveler figures, and they were like £1 each. I just picked the whole lot. I just took the whole lot. It's like,
yeah,
you know, and that was the only thing I picked up from that fair, because I wasn't expecting to find much there. But sometimes you find a real good bargain. Yeah. And I've been down to Southwest as well. I've been to Shepton Mallet. Again, that's quite a different fair because it's sort of a bit further out the way in the country. It's sort of, I guess you've got a smaller population
audience.
Yeah. But that's not that's pretty. That can be good as well. I mean, Toy Polloi does a lot of videos of those fairs at Shepton Mallet.
Yeah. So yeah, Dave from Toys Polloi is absolutely amazing guy. I'm hoping to get him on one day because I want to pick his brains about something. I don't know if you remember it. Remember a program called Collectorholics on Channel 4?
No. Well, was he on it once? Was that the one he was on? Yeah. I don't remember it in the day.
yeah. Basically, there's a channel called Collectorholics where I think it was two famous people going around collector rooms and collector houses and showing all different collectibles off, like dolls' houses. He had the Star Wars and his Masters Universe bits off, cars off. You name it. It was just called Collected Pokemon. Everything was on there.
Yeah.
And basically, Dave was one of the guys on there, and even the guy said, "Well, he's never seen a bigger collection back then on TV."
When was that? Do you remember?
Oh, must have been 10, 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
If I ever find the episode, like even on YouTube or anything, I'll let you know. Yeah. It is amazing to watch. There's a few other been programs since then, but I can remember one, Antiques Roadshow, a guy called Andrew I used to do the toy fairs with. I haven't seen him for years. I hope he's okay. But he used to bring all the high-end Star Wars stuff into the toy fairs and memorabilia shows and that sort of stuff a long time ago. But he did the Antiques Roadshow for one of his friends once, and he was literally telling everyone the Star Wars prices.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following toy fair, all the Star Wars prices went through the roof. And it's like, and even the car boots was like, 1 second. He's like, no, these are worth this much. I was like,
yeah.
The problem is they don't listen to half the people sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like a few times this week or last couple of weeks, there's been in the mornings, Good Morning TV or something.
Mm-hmm.
And a toy collector's been on there. And he's showing two different toy collections off. And one of them's like turtle figures off. But they showed the new 2018-19 Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles off. I was like, that's a bit wrong. It's not the vintage 88, 84s.
That's right. But the thing is, the cat is out of the bag now, right? I mean, you know, the days of going down to the car boot and finding stuff, I think they're long gone, to be honest. I mean, you do see some people go to the car boot, and like Bowers always goes down there and finds stuff. But
yeah,
the car boots around my way, I've never found anything. I just think, do I want to get up at some rubbish hour of the morning and try and find stuff and go home? And no, I don't bother anymore. So yeah, the cat's out of the bag, isn't it? With all that, everyone knows that these things are.
I go to one car boot on a Saturday morning. I get up at 5 o'clock, get the 5:40 bus, get there for 6 o'clock. The field is full with 300-400 cars, and literally you can see the 400-500 dealers walking around looking for toys. And when I was selling a few bits off last year, there's no way in, you'd think that person collect toys. They're just, buying it to sell on them is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I don't go to them, because no matter how early you go, as soon as the car turns up, there's like 50 people around the back of the car, and I just can't be bothered with it. It's like, really? And then, out might come a figure and it's knackered or whatever, and I just think, nah, I can't be bothered with that anymore. I'd much rather, browse eBay or Facebook groups and, actually target stuff that I would like to find.
Yeah.
That's the way I work. That's the way I work now.
The only thing I don't like about eBay or Facebook Marketplace or Vintage, a few bits, sometimes when they put in the old reissue retro toys out as the old vintage, which is wrong, or like the AliExpress, or a few people have put in official pictures up of the toys, but when you're receiving them, it's a knockoff version and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a good old phrase, isn't there? Buyer beware. And I think that applies just as much to toy collecting as it does to anything else. You know, if you're collecting watches, or you're collecting cars, or whatever it is, right? Or your paintings, or whatever it might be, even antiques or whatever, you as a buyer have a responsibility to make sure that you're not getting conned, basically. Now, obviously there are always going to be people out there that are trying to pull a fast one, right? That's just the nature of us, isn't it? As human beings, right? You can't get away from that. So however much people try and put barriers in place or tell people to not do things, they're going to do it. So if, you know, you can tell everybody not to make repo weapons, but they are going to make them. You can tell people not to sell repo as original, but unfortunately there are going to be people that do that. So as a buyer, you have to be aware, right? You have to be aware, and you've got to do your homework and your research. And unfortunately, that is just the way it is. Whenever there is a market, and this is a market, right? Toy collecting is a market. People buy and sell. And whenever there's a market, especially one where people believe they can make money, which people have been able to do over the last 15 years, right? You know, the prices of these things, especially 80s stuff, and 90s stuff is probably going to go the same way. The prices have shot up.
Yeah.
So, you know, and just like Star Wars, if you had all the vintage Star Wars stuff back in the early 90s or even late 90s, you make a killing on it now, wouldn't you? So wherever there is a market and people can make money, unfortunately, people will try and pull a fast one. And so you have to be buyer aware. So buyer beware is the phrase, isn't it? So that
the only thing I could touch on with that, and I speak to a few people about it all the time. If you know it's a repo weapon or a repo figure, especially like Stan Solo's, Chris Smith's, or Stan Solo stuff, even down to a thing like Toy Ploy, like he shows you how to remake the new toy.
Yep.
If something's been tampered with, something like that, or a repo or 3D weapon, the person who's selling it should be honest.
Of course.
You know, I've been to toy fairs, and literally, I know the guy that's got a vinyl cape Joa in a special glass box. And literally, he keeps saying it's 100% real. But if you know your Star Wars, the slight different colours from Chris Smith's and everyone else's are very close, but there are slight differences, if you know.
Yeah.
So technically, if you looked at it closely, you could say it's not a real, it's a Chris Smith's one. And he's telling people it's official vinyl cape Joa, which is not.
Yeah, well, like you say, people have to, you know, people should be honest, but unfortunately people, like I say, by the nature of us being humans, some people aren't honest. And the difficulty is, of course, that, you know, you take that vinyl cape Jawa, right? I think that's a classic example, right? That cloak, that vinyl piece of, you know, it's basically a small piece of vinyl with two holes in it, right? The barrier to replicate that is really, really low, right? It's not like you're trying to replicate a masterpiece of art, right? It's not like that. It's you know, these things were mass produced back in the day. They're by nature, you know, they were made to be mass produced. So it's really, unfortunately, it is really easy to replicate them, and unfortunately also the replicas can look almost identical to the original. So as a buyer, of course, it's sometimes really tough to distinguish between what is and isn't real. And even the dealers get confused. Right? They may think that they've got something that's original, but actually could turn out to be not. So it's a minefield out there, really, to be honest. And and unfortunately, I don't think anyone can stop it. Right? That's just the way it is. And you know, even the toy companies, Hasbro, reproduce those old figures, right? So you know, it's it's
Yeah.
part of the market now. It's part of what
Yeah.
happens in our.
It's one of the things. One of the things I watched a couple of TV series called Vinted, which have turned up around in the country now and selling the biggest toys. But they said the Star Wars weapons float, the reproductions don't. But my real question to them is, I had one of our friends test his Palatoy weapons, and most of them sank, which I know for a fact they are real. So are copied weapons like Palatoy, Lily Ladies, Meccano completely different? You know, it's one of the questions I don't know. It's one of the questions I want.
You've got to
I want to ask.
Yeah, you've got to be in that world for years to just become familiar with all the intricacies of, you know, all those weapons and what isn't and what is real. And there's, you know, websites out there that you can look at. But the best thing to do is obviously talk to people in the community who have been in that world for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Huh?
Hi, Ash.
Evening.
Evening, sir.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? That's the thing, right? We are in a community of collectors, and fortunately, there are people around who are experts in all sorts of different areas, right? Where whatever toy line it might be, there's going to be somebody out there who just knows it inside out. So it's always good to talk to them if anyone's ever in doubt. But also, you know, if I was to buy a vinyl Cape Jara, I would not buy it on eBay, right?
Yeah.
I would never buy it on eBay. I would go and see it and handle it and look at it with my own eyes, and maybe get several other pairs of eyes to have a look at it as well before I'd ever pay that amount of money on the figure.
Yeah.
Because
something like that, yes, you'd go to you wouldn't buy off eBay, would you? It's like no chance.
And that's the thing, right? If you do that as a buyer, you are taking a risk, and that's the risk. If you want to take that risk, that's fine. You can take that risk, but buyer beware.
Yeah.
It's always, toy collecting is no different to any other
any hobbies, any collectibles, any hobbies whatsoever. They see it in like trainers, t-shirts, you name it. There's a load of like knockoffs or reproductions, that sort of stuff, which is fine if you're wearing it and that sort of stuff. If you are coming to sell it, just be honest to the people and they'll be honest to you. Come back to you. So 2 questions before we move on.
Sure.
One, it's what class or what years would you say vintage toys would be? Would you say at the beginning of the 90s, like 95, would you say anything after that or before that is vintage now? Or where would you draw a line at vintage now?
Well, that's a great question. I think I think that might depend on the individual, you know. I think it might depend on what they have grown up with, what they're nostalgic for. But if I was to generalize, I would say, you know, if you're looking at the sort of vintage toys that we're collecting, that, you know, ignoring the kind of tin plate stuff back from the 50s, I would say, you know, that the majority of those vintage items are probably somewhere from you know, mid 60s, if you like, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, and I would say for me, I kind of, it starts getting blurry around those early 90s. So anything up to sort of 93 is kind of blurry, but other people may consider, you know, much, you know, anything maybe even from the 2000s as vintage. You know, I think it really depends on the person, to be honest. But I know in my mind, when I go hunting for stuff, I'm definitely looking for 70s and 80s, right? Although I do like the 90s stuff. You know, like I say, I kind of, Toxic Crusaders and the later Turtles kind of growing on me, right? And not that I'm going to start collecting them, but I appreciate them. But I have to focus somewhere, right? But I would probably, you know, definitely starts the 90s for me is where it starts sort of fade, you know, sort of tailing off. But you know, there are, you know, look at the gaming world, right? You know, some of those consoles now in the 2000s consider vintage.
No, which is crazy.
It really depends on who it is and what's nostalgic for them. And I can't dictate what's vintage. I think it really depends. I don't think there's an official, well, maybe there is
timeline.
I mean, like for antiques, I think the official statement is like 100 years old. Like if something's 100 years old, I think it can be called an antique.
And And to find something 100 years old is very hard or pricey.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there aren't very many vintage toys that are 100 years old, but yeah. So I don't know. Some people might say it has to be 25 years old or whatever. You know, I don't know, but that would be my definition.
Yeah. So technically, then, with the reissue stuff of now, is Star Wars retro figures, your Indiana Jones retro, your other bits and pieces like that that's been coming out from Hasbro and other toy companies, would you collect them yourself? Because they are based on the 80s toys, but not, if you know what I mean. Because they are, like I say, if you know your stuff, they are slightly slightly different colours. The Star Wars figures are slightly different. One's got Ken out, one's got like Hasbro inside. Would you consider getting the reissue retro stuff or not?
I would be lying if I said no, because I do have some. I don't have a huge number, so a good example actually is the indie stuff, right?
Yes.
Let me just. Do you mind if I go and grab some bits?
No, go for it.
So, actually, you know what? Let me just see. Let me just see if I can just flip. See if we can use technology here. Is it going to work? Yeah. I've gone wrong. What have I done? What have I done?
It's still there at the moment. We're still clear.
I pressed the wrong button then. There we go. Is that working still? Yay.
Yeah. Perfect.
I'm going to just, it might be a bit dark actually. I might have to turn the lights on. There we go. I might have to turn the lights on. Let me just see.
Hey, a bag full of stuff. Perfect.
Yeah, there's a bag full of stuff there, yeah. Oh, God, my lights aren't working. Ah!
Oh, you're still clear.
Typical. Right, if I go here, can you see? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me still, though.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, that's cool. Right, so this is the indie range from the 80s, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they did, what was it? They did 4 figures in Series 1, and then there's a mail away figure as well. And then Series 2 added another, what is that, 4 figures?
Yeah.
And then there's the horse as well there.
Yeah.
And then they did a couple of play sets in Series 1, the famous goals. And then in Series 2 they added the convoy truck and the Streets of Cairo play set. And these are really cool play sets. I absolutely love this line. And this is one of the first things I wanted to try and complete when I started collecting. So when they came out, or when Hasbro announced the retro wave, I was all in because they added figures that we didn't
never released. Yeah,
that weren't released. So I basically, the way I work is I buy figures that complement and add to my vintage items. And in this particular case, I've actually put them in a case just to make it kind of go nicely with the rest of the display here. So that's a good example, and you can see here that's the only Hasbro 6-inch figure that I've purchased. Well, that one and Tote. I forgot I had them on pre-order. I completely forgot. But that's my only only time I've headed into 6-inch. So, oh crikey, let's bring this back. So are you there still?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'll put you on big screen while you're doing that, so it makes it easy for you.
Yeah. So so I can't say no, I don't buy any of them because that's not true. So I like to buy the bits that complement the vintage stuff. Oh, another example. I'm going to go wandering again, if you don't mind.
No, do you want to a big screen or small screen?
Whatever is good for you. What am I doing? I've pressed that wrong button again. I've got to stop doing that. See this one? Here we go. Back on here. So another example is Stan Solo.
Yeah.
So, for example, all these are vintage figures.
Yeah.
But I've added a few in. So, for example, there's the Iconicon Boba Fett there.
Yeah.
Because I just liked him. But then the Bantha.
So
the Bantha looks great there. And there's actually, if you look down, there's a little mini Bantha. You see that?
Yep.
little baby bantha there, which is pretty cool. And then there's some Pro Customs Boba Fett's there as well, and up here is an original Han with the removable helmet there in disguise. So there's a few. There's a few that I do pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. If the company doesn't make them and that sort of stuff, then yes, it's a perfect way to finish them collections off, or toys that wasn't made, wasn't it? That's a perfect way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think that in that case it's brilliant. And you know, yeah. I don't you know, if it's a figure that was made back in the day, then I probably wouldn't buy it, because I like to collect the vintage version of it. I don't know why. I just like the age to these things. So I used to, you know, before collecting all this vintage toy stuff, I mean, I liked old stuff. I collected old automobilia signs. So
yeah,
you know, like Shell signs and Bosch signs and all that kind of stuff. And I still got some in the garage on the wall. So you know, I was into all that kind of stuff, and I buy old furniture and do a bit of restoration on it as far as my woodworking would take me. And old cars. I like to just like fix up old cars. I think I got all that stuff from my dad, basically. He was an engineer himself, and he just liked to mess around with these kinds of things. So I've always liked collecting just old stuff. And yeah, that just carries on to I just like the idea of knowing that when I pick up the figure, it's been around since the 80s or 70s or even earlier, and who knows where that figure has been.
Yeah, its journey, where it's been gone, and
journey,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is unbelievable. I'm hoping, I'm crossing my fingers, they release the reissue the Indiana Jones playsets as well.
Yeah.
I'd make a few more of them as well.
That Well of Souls, Well of the Souls playset is awesome. It's an amazing playset, and the arc is just like, it's so gold and shiny gold. It's unbelievable. They've done I mean, for back in the day, they did an amazing job.
Yeah.
Yeah, will they do it though? I don't think they will. I don't think they will, but who knows?
They're teasing them with the 6-inch figures. If you buy all 6-inch figures, you get like a piece of a certain item, and that sort of stuff. So they've done a build-a-figure or builder-item in the 6-inch. Lego always do the big play sets.
Yeah.
It's one toy line I really want to get into, the Indiana Jones, because I've got, is it the Playmates versions? They did the 3.5-inch figures, and I've got most of that sort of stuff, or quite a lot of that. I haven't got all of it, but I've got most of the reissue stuff. Is it with Playmates, was it?
I don't know, actually. Which one's that? I don't remember Playmates doing an indie.
The Crystal Skull version.
Oh, the Crystal Skull. Right.
When they did the 3.5-inch figures, they did all the movies and that sort of stuff. You know, so I'm still in an to get the new Hasbro reissue stuff. It's like once with space and money. It's like, what do you do? It's like, where do I put them? So it's like something like that. I want to really do a big display and that sort of stuff. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really, you know, back in the day, they didn't really do much indie stuff. You know, basically, I've just showed you pretty much all the stuff they did back in the day from Kenner. LJN,
which is a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, they did do the 12-inch indie as well, because they had obviously they had the 12-inch.
Yeah,
so they just reused that, but it's got the. I'll show you. It has the most useless accessory.
Yes. Oh, Tendo.
The 12-inch indie has the most useless or ridiculous accessory ever made for a toy, and I think that is ever in modern or vintage, and that's the hat. I mean, look at that. I mean,
oh, it's perfect.
I mean, that is just so bad.
At least you know it's real. At least you know it's like, yeah.
I mean, that has got to be the worst. I mean, what were they thinking? The rest of it, actually, you know, they've got a good jacket there. He's got the whip and everything. He has the gun. He doesn't have a
satchel.
Satchel. But so he did a pretty good job until this. I mean, what is that? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So
99%. Do you think that? I don't think it's real. Is it? You would say it's real, would you? It looks like a knockoff thing that comes with a. Oh.
So yeah, and so back in the day there wasn't that much, right? Indie stuff. The only other figures that were released were by LJN.
Yeah.
Again, I can just swap over. Oh, I did it that time, right? Yeah, LJN. So they did these 3 figures. And all they did was these 3 figures. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty. I quite like those. A lot of people don't like those ones, but I think they're kind of quirky, and yeah, I like those ones. And then we didn't really get anything until what, the 2000s, right? Yeah. So yeah, I'm quite happy that they are redoing these, and I'm particularly happy that they're adding to the line, right? They're actually introducing new figures. So I'm looking forward to the Jones Senior. I'll grab that one for sure.
I think that's what's making that line very eclectic to collectors and vintage people, where they didn't release all the figures back in the 80s. Now they are releasing them 30, 40 years later. At least you can now get a full set of vintage Indiana Jones figures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that the Indy and Marion, they are super hard to get in vintage now. I was really lucky with that collection. I got that collection about 8 years ago, and very fortunate. I got a lot of those in a bundle. I just managed to find a guy who was needing to sell them, and I scooped them up basically. But that Marion figure these days, if you want to get an original card, it's so hard to get. And people have said that actually the Hasbro version is all right. It's not a great replica. The dress isn't exactly the same, and they were just in fact, all of those figures they're all right. I mean, they're good for the price, but in terms of the detail and stuff on those figures, it's okay.
But at least you can actually tell the difference, can't you, with the original? You can tell
the difference, yeah. But but at least you can now, if you wanted a Marion, you can get one, or you can get one from Stan Solo. Stan Solo actually has a much better replica of the original.
I know Stan Solo, Chris. He bought all the molds for the Indiana Jones as well as some of the Star Wars. And technically, his next project before Indiana Jones got announced was going to do all the Indiana Jones figures again.
Mm-hmm.
But then Hasbro said, well, they're coming out with it's like Christmas, like a step back off them. If not, I know Stan Solo was in production of the figures.
Yeah, he wanted. I think he started out with the Marion. I think he was going to do the Indy next. But yeah, as soon as Hasbro announced what they were doing, then obviously you want to step away from that. You're not going to go and compete with Hasbro.
No,
you're asking for trouble, I think. So that it makes sense, that decision. Yeah.
I like Chris Smith's work and what he does and everything else, but then sometimes a lot of people hate what he does, and that sort of stuff is taken away from the nostalgia. But technically, if you say it's Chris Smith stuff, which is no problem whatsoever, I actually like the guy in bits. I was trying to get him on one episode, but he don't like now coming on shows that too much.
Yeah,
and bits.
I think his stuff is the quality of his stuff is unbelievable.
Yeah,
like I said, I got a few of his figures. The that Bantha, for example, it's done such a great job. It's
unbelievable.
I've done a video on that Bantha, and I kind of compare it to the Dewback, for example, which is if that Bantha was going to be released, it would have been released around the time of the Dewback. So I got a video that compares the boxes and the figure and the creatures, and he's done such a brilliant job. I mean, it feels good. It feels high quality. All the decisions he's made around the design are just spot on. So, and the figures feel like original vintage figures. The plastic feels the same. So I think that stuff's quality. And yeah, there are people out there who moan about it, but they'll moan about everything. And like we said before, buyer beware. You've got, you can't. People try and stop other people doing things, and that's just it's crazy to do that. It's a free market. It's so people can do what they want. Well, as long as they're not breaking the law or whatever, but they are. That's why we have these independent toy makers now, right? And if we didn't have them, well, I think it would be a real shame, really. We need the independent toy makers to push the boundaries and extend what it is that we can collect. I mean, there's a whole. I don't know if you watch Slime House, do you? Yeah. I mean, he's into that whole new movement, right? Of these. I don't know what we call them. They're independent toy makers, but they're like artists almost. I guess there's a name for them. And yeah, it's kind of there's a whole movement right around that as well, which looks very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So you need
I can remember Theo did this Robin of Sherwood or Sherwood of Forest. Yeah. He did the Robin Hood figures. He took them to Sherwood himself.
Yeah.
He asked in a few groups because he was missing a few figures. And a few people said, he says, yeah, well, I'll sell them to you bits and pieces. It's like, just said, I've just got a project and that sort of stuff. He never said what it was. But when he did the episode of that episode, I can remember Nick from Numa Studios has said, the same guy that's selling it before for 10 quid like a figure, he tripled his prices because they know how many people were going to the show looking for the Robin Hood figures. It was like unbelievable. It was crazy.
Oh, there's loads of examples of that.
Yeah.
Action Force, right? Action Force. Yeah. Years back, well, not that far back, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you go around a toy fair and you'd see carded Action Force for like £5 or whatever. People would just walk past them because if you look at the card for an Action Force figure, it's not the most enticing card. It's just kind of red with a diagonal stripe and blue. And you got the figure, and I think a lot of people just thought they were cheap figures. And I'm pretty sure when Analog Toys did his series of Action Force videos, that after that, everyone just went mad and started trying to collect Action Force, and the prices, I'm sure, have gone up because of that. Yeah, well, absolutely.
Talking about that and that sort of stuff, I don't know if you've seen it. I'm so tempted to back it because I actually like it. It's something for nostalgia for the UK. Is Palatoy's actually done their own book? Is it the Palatoy book or something with the guys that was got last Friday? The back of the Kickstarter's now out for it, and it's like 275 pages or something.
Yeah, so it's my Palatoy story. I think that's the title of the book.
Yeah.
Written by Bob Reekin, the chief designer, I guess you call him, from Palatoy. So he was in charge of Action Man and Action Force and other stuff as well, and I guess produced by is it Brian Hickey who produced the. In fact, I've got a couple of those books. Let me just show you. If you don't mind, I'll just go and.
Yeah. Is it the same as the Kenner one they did for Star Wars?
It's the Total Action Force.
Yeah.
I missed out on the very first Kickstarter so they've done 2 volumes of Total Action Force, and I missed out.
Whoa.
I missed out on the original Kickstarter, which was a hardback, and but they did a recent Kickstarter which was to produce it again as softback. So that's volume 1, and then there's a volume 2. Here, volume 2, which is I have got in hardback because I backed that one, and so this is by Brian Hickey and Paddy Lennon and David McDonald, and these are brilliant. So this first one covers like Action Force Series 1 to 3. It's got all the classic Series 1 figures, and then all the different teams. Like the enemy team. So you got things like the
Baron Blood and
Kraken and all that kind of stuff in there, and it's fantastic artwork in here as well. It's really awesome. The way they've done this book is absolutely brilliant. So Brian is working with Bob, I guess he's doing all the artwork and all the production side of it. But Bob, obviously, Bob Reekin, he he was there right from 60 something to I guess to the end, and so he, if anyone, there's no one else
stuff.
that knows that stuff, knows Palitoy more than he does. So I've backed it as soon as that was as soon as it was available to back. I went and backed it because I think it's going to be a brilliant book. I think it's going to be so much.
It's one of the things, if you're like a UK collector or toy collector that likes Star Wars or anything, that would be virtually a no-brainer to anyone that's UK based, or if they want to know UK toy history, that's the one.
Yeah, of course. And it doesn't just cover the boy stuff on the main things. Obviously that Palitoy had Star Wars, and they had Action Man and Action Force, and then they had a whole host of girls' toys as well.
Yeah.
Famous toys, and this will apparently this covers all of it.
So, I know there's not many images in there. They did say there's not many clear images, but it's going to be one of them ones to the golden age of Palitoy and the history.
Yeah.
I'm like, normally I collect toy books and that sort of stuff. I've got like the Turtle book, the unofficial Turtle book, and a few of the toy. I've got the old action figure guides, the Tomar and the Lees and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So something like that, I think I'll get this weekend overdone with, and then but next week I'm going to very seriously think about it and that sort of stuff. But I'm very, very tempted.
I'm. Do you know what? I've got more into the books, so I think it's sometimes it's difficult to find decent resources that help you on collect stuff. Sometimes it's difficult to get decent images of the figures and all the accessories. Some of these lines. I mean, I've got in my bookmarks in my browser, I've got hundreds of links to pages that I think are really good pages for resources of all sorts of different 80s and 70s lines. So if I'm getting into a new line, and there's a few that I'm trying to get into right now. So one of them is LJN's Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
that's one line. Clash of the Titans is another line, but I don't know whether that's got the Kraken in it. So whether that's a kind of grail item, but you never know.
At least the only good thing with the items you're collecting or vintage, like you are collecting, the toy lines are very small and to collect. There's only like 5-6 figures in a set, except for you take your Star Wars is probably 97, Action Force is probably 70-80 figures.
There's quite a lot in Action Force actually, because they Action Force had the Series 1, then they had all the teams, and then it morphed into G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
So all the G.I. Joe figures came across and were packaged as Action Force. So I don't actually know how many Action Force figures there are, to be honest.
But technically, if you kept away for, say, the big 5, Lego, Action Force, G.I. Joe, Star Wars, Barbie, and I think there's one other one, like Transformers back in the day.
Yeah.
All the rest of the lines are pretty smallish lines. Like, as you said, there's only 4 play sets and 6 figures, like 10 figures for Indiana Jones.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, Motu, I guess, was the other big one there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Although, yeah, you're right. I do love collecting the smaller lines. So a really nice line that I love, which only has a few figures in or items, is Tron.
Yes. So, Tron cycles and Tron figures. There's about 4 figures and 3 vehicles.
Yeah. So, and this is actually another example. So there's basically 4 figures, and I love those figures. So those are by Tomy back in 82 or 3. And then there are 2 light cycles, the red and the yellow one. But you can see there's a blue light cycle there as well. That was a re-release. So NECA, I guess, had the access to the original molds or replicated them. I'm not sure how they did it. But NECA brought out for the 20th anniversary of, or was it 20th? Yeah, the 20th anniversary of Tron. NECA brought out some new figures and the new light cycle. So that figure there, this one here, is a new figure.
Yeah.
The grey one, and then that blue light cycle. But yeah, there were only 6 items in the original line. So that's a great one to collect. Not that you see them very often now.
No.
But I did see some at the Sandown. I saw a few of the figures in the light side.
I know I've got the light blue Tron figure in my collection, and that's it. It's like, for me, getting rid of the old stuff is very hard to, especially doing toy shows, that sort of stuff. So
yeah, that's why I go to. I always. So I'm very fortunate. I've got a few friends in America. So what I do now is I scour all the US sites and US eBay as well, and because I've got a friend in America, I can use their address. So they've kindly let me use their address in eBay, which means that I can look for items that are only delivered in the US, right? Because not everybody delivers worldwide.
no.
So when you do that, then all of a sudden a load more stuff kind of appears in the search
Yes.
result. So I do quite a lot of, and then Facebook groups in the US. I'm not afraid of trying to, if somebody's like in the US selling stuff, I'm not afraid to put a bid in and ask them to send it to my friend, rather than directly across the pond. And then once I've got enough of a bundle together, I get them to send the box over. So that way it saves me on postage.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that's what I'm doing that more and more now, just to try and finish off some of these items, because you just don't see them in the
no.
Yeah,
well, you can find them in the UK, but they're like, for example, like 50 quid a figure. But in America, there might be like $2 or $3 a figure, and that's the difference.
Yeah, you can definitely get items cheaper in the US.
Yeah, 100%.
And even though the exchange rate is still a bit crappy, even with with the exchange rate, still you're getting a better deal, and 100%. They're just generally cheaper. Generally, they're cheaper. Yeah.
Yes. So, well, Dave, we're almost come up to the whole hour mark and bits and pieces.
Wow, is that
so technically? Yeah, weirdly enough. I did say it goes quite quick. So technically, Dave, where can we actually find you? If people want to reach out to you, Instagram, where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on all the usual social places. My main place is my channel, Vintage Toy Rush on YouTube. I also, under the same name, Vintage Toy Rush on Instagram and Twitter. So those are the 3 primary ways of getting hold of me. If anyone wants to ask questions, chat, whatever, and I'm open to doing that, no problem at all. Yeah, that's where you find me. Recently, I've just been putting out videos for toy fairs, but often I'll do restorations of things and then features on certain toy lines. Yeah, and I'm always trying to add to the collection, but I've literally run out of space. I've literally run out of space, so that's not stopping me at the moment. So I'm fearing that I might be morphing into a hoarder.
No, you don't want to get that far, trust me. I think I've gone past that place. It's like, yeah, where do you start and finish? I was like, exactly. I'm trying to sort some stuff out for the toy fairs coming up and that sort of stuff, but I was like, nope, that's staying before, so technically you've got a few more videos coming up on your channel then soon?
Yeah, I don't plan too far ahead. I know I've got some restorations coming up. There's a few feature videos I wouldn't mind doing on some of the items in the collection. So yeah, whatever comes up. And so I just, like I said, some YouTubers have videos all stacked up and ready to go. I've always said I'll just put a video out when I'm ready to put a video out.
Yeah.
And that's the way I work, because I'm just limited by time, basically. So if I had more time, I would put more stuff out.
Oh, don't have to about time, but there you go.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's pretty. People say, what's the limiting factor for your collecting? Is it space? Is it money? Time is a big factor, isn't it? If you're trying to hunting stuff down, takes time. You're talking to people. You're trying to follow trails. It does take you're doing the research and stuff like that. It takes time to build up this stuff.
The time you're looking for that figure, you've got 30 other figures coming through the door, and it's like that space was for that one figure. It's like no anymore. Yeah,
exactly.
But for me, it's always about space. I'd like that extra bit of space but for some reason I keep finding it in somewhere in this place. I don't know how, but I'm still thinking of brainwaves of how to do it and that sort of stuff and that sort of stuff. But yeah, as for me, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. DavidWorldtoys on all of them. As probably seen earlier, I am going to the NEC Toy Fair on the 1st of October. I also, the week after, will be at the Redditch Kingfisher Shopping Centre for Echo Base, the second Echo Base of the year. I will be doing another stall there. Not as big as the last one, but I will be there with a stall. All leading up to the end of the year, I've booked an Italy toy adventure across to Italy for 7 to 10 days to Italy.
Nice. Wow.
Which I know a few people over there and a few of the bits, so I'll be going out for that. A few honourable mentions. Tomorrow night, I think you've got your toy division on their channel on live stream. You've got, I think, Shabby or Size doing an open chat night on Shabby's channel, I think, tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Me and Baz are not here Thursday because I am down in London and Baz has got a few things to sort out at home. The ZSR guys should be here on Friday night as normal. Saturday and Sunday, you've got a plethora of YouTuber lives all over the weekend, from Lego builds to toys chats to everything else. I'm down in London, MCM Comic Con for the next 3 or 4 days, where Star Wars Celebration was held, but I think it's a bit smaller. So,
yeah,
you know,
imagine so.
I don't know how big Star Wars was. I'll probably ask you that in a minute after. But yes, I won't be doing one this Sunday because I said I'll be coming back from London. I might give next Tuesday a break. I don't know. I'm still working on a few guests. But Dave, thanks again for so much for coming on and talking about vintage toys for the last hour.
No problem at all. Thanks for inviting me on. I've enjoyed the chat with yourself. It's great.
Good luck with all the future. Good luck with the channel. Hope it all goes well. You will find Dave's links to his channel in the description down below after. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks again for this special Tuesday night. If you do want to find anyone else on right now, if you are just about to click off, Brian Action Figures, the Irish guys, normally do a toy chat as well on Brian Action Figures. There's the Tuesday night. They should be starting round about now. So thanks again. Thanks again to Dave. Thanks for everyone in the chat who has joined us tonight. And good night.